All right, I'm Jason from Tech.Ed, and I'm here with
Phil Goldie, and I look after the server and developer tools business for Microsoft Australia.
And you.
And my name is John Paolo Carraro, but I'm usually known as GP,
Okay.
and I lead the evangelism team at Microsoft.
Very good. And so what I wanted to get a sense of today, obviously we're talking cloud and all things that Microsoft has to do, and you've probably got a lot of experience with Australian companies that are either looking at implementing Microsoft services or how they can leverage that. So if you've got maybe some examples of that, or where people are using Azure right now, or different cloud-based services.
Yeah, sure. So maybe before we give you some of the examples, let me kind of just explain a little bit about where Azure fits into the product strategy. So from a cloud perspective, we have offerings across infrastructure, platform, and software. And so that's things like the software as a service layer, hosted exchange, or BPOS, which is the online exchange, email, SharePoint offerings, and that's obviously pretty widely used now in the Australian market. In the platform layer, Azure, which is very much targeted at people developing applications, not only on .NET but on a number of other frameworks, using Azure as a platform to get those applications out to market. And then in the infrastructure space, both some of the features of Azure allowing it to operate as an infrastructure as a service, but also probably in terms of scale, more what we're doing with hosters and customers, helping them build hosted and private cloud offerings, which is using a lot of our Windows Server, Hyper-V, System Center technologies. So
if a business, I guess, already has an IT shop, are they sort of the sort of customer that you're going after, or is it really upstart new companies that you would look to take advantage of cloud services? Or a combination of both?
It's both, it's both. So we see models that for things like Azure are very attractive for smaller companies, particularly those doing, using the web as the way to reach their customers. For those guys, it gives a number of advantages. Number one, don't need to invest in a whole lot of infrastructure. You get a very dynamic, elastic pay-per-use kind of model on something like Azure.
So if somebody has a site that becomes popular, it's going to cope with that. It's going to, regardless of how, if it, say it's a tech site and it makes it, for my instance anyway, there's been a couple of times where I've had posts that get picked up by the major organisations. And I'm pretty happy about that. So if we make it to the front page of Dig, the site goes down, that sort of thing. So if it was hosted on a cloud server, or basically a Azure platform from Microsoft, it can handle spikes of, is that an infinite number, or you pay per level, or how does that work?
Infinite is a big number, yeah?
Indeed.
But it is as far as a website is concerned, it is as equivalent to an infinite number in the sense that you're never gonna be
for all
beyond,
practical purposes.
Correct.
Okay.
And the thing is, you can either automate that particular process in terms of when you start monitoring some element of load, you can add multiple instances of that particular site, or you manually. When I say manually, you actively press a button and make it happen. And the reason that there is those multiple choices is obviously when you augment the capacity you put behind your website, you're going to be charged more because you're using more of the capacity.
So that's how it works, basically. If that's almost like a penalty, I guess. If somebody becomes popular, then they have to pay more.
Well, why is that a penalty? Is think of it as electricity at home.
Yeah.
You're cooking, or you're having your microwave running or something. Then you want to plug your vacuum cleaner. Mm-hmm. You're not going to call your electricity company and say, hey guys, I'm about to put my vacuum cleaner on. Yeah. Can you provision some extra electricity for me? Mm-hmm. You just put it in, and they're going to charge you for the few extra watts of consumption. And that's the model that I think is very, very attractive.
Yep.
Is you have, in some respect, you can think of it as a pre-provisioned infrastructure ready for you to use.
Yep.
And when you need it, you tap into it, and you just pay for what you used.
So a scenario I would see where that would work, and maybe you have customers like this, is if they are selling products and they have a big influx, maybe they run a sale or something, they have a big influx of traffic, and so they're actually generating revenue from the sale of the products, And so if they do attract that extra, bill for resources, basically,
there's a lot of businesses that have exactly that kind of model. In fact, almost all businesses actually have that kind of computational model at some point. So if you're an online florist, then Mother's Day and Valentine's Day, you're probably 15, 20 times busier than most other points during the year. Yep. You get that opportunity to not have to build at that capacity. When you get into it, whether that's a simple online business around something like selling a particular product, or whether it's a bigger enterprise customer, there are lots of examples of those kind of applications where there's either spike in demand that's predictable, or the spike in demand which is unpredictable, or there's just the need to perform some heavy computational processing based on migrating platforms or some sort of internal project where you want 2 or 3 weeks or 2 or 3 days or 2 or 3 hours worth of capacity, and you can just go buy that.
So in Australia, obviously, where our internet connection is fairly limited in certain parts of the country, and we have caps and those sorts of things. So how have you seen adoption for the cloud services that Microsoft offer? How have you seen adoption play out in Australia?
So actually, it's interesting. I've got a couple of examples. But one example was something that we worked with a company called ComputerShare, and they did a session today, actually, sharing some of the experience they had with the platform. And so what's interesting, they do many things, but one of the things they do is they work with large companies that go IPO, the initial public offering on the stock market. And you can imagine that particular workload is very spiky. So what happens is that you have a massive amount of requests at the beginning of the IPO, and then that request tails off. Today, they're running it on their own data center, and they need to create a capacity, so they provision for the peak of that IPO, because obviously you cannot reject request for stock allocation. But as soon as half a day or 6 hours after the opening of the IPO, the requests go almost half the size. And then the 3 days after the beginning of the IPO is next to nothing. But they need to keep it open for, say, 6, 7, 10 days, whatever the regulation asks or the company asks.
Sure.
So what they've done is, let's create that environment on Azure, over-provision on the average, if you will, at the beginning. Keep the load up when it's needed, and immediately start deprovisioning servers while time goes on.
Yep.
So that was one aspect that was very interesting to them. Another example linked to that is one of their businesses. Is to provide that service to a Chinese company, because China happens to become now a very fertile IPO market, because a lot of those companies go from government-owned to public-owned. And they were servicing those particular IPO type from Australia, where bandwidth was expensive.
Right.
So an added benefit, which actually worked very well for them, was to move that particular workload in our Singapore data center, where they could serve Chinese requests from a location that, first of all, was closer to them, and also cheaper to serve.
That probably leads me to another question. Do you guys have any Australian-based servers? I know when Azure first launched, it wasn't. Has that changed? Is there Australian-located servers now, like data centers for?
So no, so there is no data centers that is located in Australia.
Okay. But
we announced, and maybe Phil, you can give us more details. We've announced the Azure Appliance, which is an opportunity for a selected number of partners to take the bits, if you will, the code base of Azure, and actually run it themselves in the location that they choose.
Mm. So is there any impact in not having those? Obviously, they're still in the Asia-Pacific region, but is there any impact on our businesses for not having those Australian-hosted services? If companies are moving around large sorts of files or those?
Most of the time, no.
Okay.
But there are scenarios where there is some concerns, or certainly some conversation around data locations, and mostly around the public sector type of company. So if you're a government, if you are, if you work at secret defense type of levels or whatever, obviously there is a genuine conversation and concerns about
being hosted externally.
But I'm a plumber. I'm a a council, or I'm a company that doesn't really matter where the data is, because right now it happens to be under my desk, and under my desk is not very secure anyway.
That's
because
true.
people are coming in and out of my office, and who knows? I don't have backup, I don't have recovery, I don't have any of that.
Yep.
The sheer value of having my data in a managed state way outweigh the fact that it's not in Australia.
Fair enough. With that, would you say that if the NBN was to be implemented, fibre to the home, or obviously to all the businesses as well, do you see that really driving adoption of cloud services?
I mean, broadband is a key part of driving the digital economy, absolutely, and that's our belief is, and that's not just an impact on our cloud offerings, but everything we do from unified communications through to Azure and BPOS. I mean, they all depend on an increment in broadband accessibility and speeds. That kind of goes without saying. So it's a key driver of doing what we do as a business.
Another question I had was about competition. Where are we at in terms of the market and competitors that you guys are up against? Does Amazon EC2 and things like that, other platforms internationally, is that what you're up against? And I guess what are you offering that they're not?
Yeah, maybe I'll let GP talk first.
So there is an important distinction that right now the market does not really fully understand, and we're actively, especially from an evangelism perspective, to differentiate and have people understand the difference between an infrastructure as a service, like an Amazon EC2, and a platform as a service, which Azure is. And once you start explaining the difference, you start realizing that even though we compete, the value proposition and the offers are quite different. And if you are a software vendor, what you really, really want is a platform as a service, because you really want to think about applications. You want to think about, how do I maximize the opportunity of codifying intellectual property and not go into the lower levels of the virtual machines, which I need to patch anyway, and I need to manage my own load balancing, and I need to do all my configuration. I really want to think about what's my site, what's my application, put it up, and do that. So once we start having the conversation, even though we compete with some of those companies, there is a clear distinction in the offer that we have and the offer that they have.
Okay. What about pricing? What sort of levels? I guess it depends on the size of the business and the amount of traffic or data or services, if they're using SharePoint and Office and Exchange, everything. Like, if it's all hosted, then obviously that adds up to more. But what would be a typical sort of budget that somebody would need to enter into hosting with, or the experiences that you've had?
So we have a price list. You own the money side of the equation, so you can better discuss this. But certainly on the conversation I have with the early adopters, the simplest model for them is pay as you go. And I don't remember the exact final price list, but it's roughly, say, 12 cents an hour for the compute cycle.
Yep.
Is that about this? And
you pay per user?
No, per compute cycle.
Yeah, so it doesn't matter how many users you've got. Okay.
Correct. In that particular model, you also pay for how much data you store, and how much bandwidth you consume.
Right. Yep.
So that's the ultimate usage-based model. Now, similar to other industries such as cell phones or other things like that, you can, in some respect, get a subscription or pre-buy in advance. In some respects, if you get a subscription, if you commit to a longer period of time, you can get a discount on a pure pay-as-you-go model. And some people prefer to pay as they go, and really, if I shut it down, it costs me nothing. And others say, you know what, I'm going to use this base capacity anyway, so I want to pre-buy that, and I will be paying as you go if I go above this. Right. The same way you have a plan with your cell phone, you might have 200 minutes that you're going to use at a discount, and then if you go over, then you pay a little extra.
Okay.
There's a couple of other things interesting in the payment context. One is we've developed a number of tools. So at windowsazure.com, there's modelling there where you can go and pick typical kinds of workloads and users to get a sense of what that cost looks like.
So it's like a calculator.
It's an ROI calculator, effectively, that shows you likely costs. And then the other interesting part of the conversation is if you go back to customers and help them understand what's the actual